Okay, I am going to now, Jason, are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Hey, Jason is going to lead us in some training and discussion on ham radios. And actually, Jason, while you're there, let me do a few things.
Let me
here.
blind you.
Sorry, Jason. Okay, so to preempt what Jason is going to train us on and get us going here, get in this here. Okay, this look familiar? If you haven't logged in, you need to log in because there's lots of things going on in here. You can see in Area 3 we got 636 people. When we rolled out the software not very many months ago, we had 282. So we haven't So now this is Area. Yeah, so but you'll notice there's a few little changes. There is my roles, which is different, and then there's ham radio. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, ham radio, when you click into it, you'll be able to see, there's some information, and this page will get better, but you will be able to see a primary frequency, a secondary frequency, and then a net session time. Is it net? Okay. Never mind. No, that'll be changed.
Network.
Okay, I thought you said P over and over again, so net. That'll be changed. So I don't even know what it stands for. Network, right? Okay. So we'll change that. So, but what this is, you're going to explain more what the net is, or do you want me to explain? Okay. So, well, let me explain it just real quick because you're going to go into detail to him. So, obviously, to be able to get a message, to be able to use the radios, you have to have a frequency, right? So this, at any time you can go there, you'll see the frequency, and you need to pretty much memorize that. The area assistants will put that frequency in, and it will be an area frequency. So area 4 will have one, area 3 will have another one, and then there will be a net session, and that will basically be a time where once a week, so say like Sunday at 10 o'clock, 10 p.m., you will go onto that frequency and you'll listen. You'll listen to somebody, what's that?
And talk if you have one.
If you have a license, you could talk. If you're not, then you might be able to whisper. No. But yeah, exactly. We need to get in a habit of going there every week. And it might only be 5 minutes, right? And listening to whatever message is out there. The reason is so if everything is shut off, right? Communication, internet shut off. You know that it's Sunday at 10 o'clock at this frequency. You chime in, and you'll get the message. And at that point, it might be, hey, now we're going to be communicating every day at 12:05. So every day come on at 12:05, or it might be every hour. 5 after the hour, there'll be a new update, communication, or maybe it just starts flowing in communication on that frequency. But that is the plan. It's not my plan, obviously, but that's what they do, but we have facilitated it on our website. So, area assistance, you're going to need to choose a primary and a secondary frequency, and you're also going to need to choose a net time session, and then assign somebody to basically who has the equipment and understands that and is licensed to whenever that net time is to, maybe give the schedule, what's going on at the area over the radio during that period of time. There'll be some communication back and forth, and that's it. Every week we do that. Yes?
So all of us that are in our group, we'll be able to click on that and hear what.
When you log in, you'll get your frequency and the time, and it'll be area specific. Then you get your ham radio, you program that frequency in. Jason's going to go over a lot of that right now. You can program that frequency in, and then on that time, say it's Sunday at 10 o'clock, you're going to turn your radio on and you're going to listen and try to get connected. If you're too far out, like where you're not getting the message, then that would be your and the area's challenge to try to get the message out to everybody in some way, whether through repeaters or whatever, to try to get networked. And it might not be easy, and there also might be, let's say there has to be, let's say Area 4 has Garden Valley. Well, you're not going to reach Garden Valley. So maybe Garden Valley needs to get their own little net session and using that frequency going in that area. So, and then we'll let it take legs. It'll grow legs on its own and start to work the way it should be. So, Jason. I'll get you logged.
Thank you. We gotta wait for you to log back in. So it's called a net, N-E-T, like a network, and it's typically once a week. So we would get on there and basically call out if there's any announcements or anything. We'd run through everything and then take check-ins. And so just so you know, if you transmit on a ham radio frequency and you are not a licensed amateur radio operator through the FCC, it is illegal. The most important thing about this is it's not like a walkie-talkie that you just pick up from Walmart. I don't know if you remember when you were kids, you just pick up a walkie-talkie, and I'll be going over that because it's part of kind of how ham radio works, but it's a lot more complicated, and if you wait to figure it out until you need it, it's never going to work.
How much is the license?
It's $14 to take the test. If you fail, it's another $14 to try again.
What's the penalty if you get busted for communicating without a license?
$14.
It depends. It depends, and so the ham radio is kind of a self-regulating entity, and if people are picking up unauthorized transmissions, they'll pull out an antenna, a directional antenna, and triangulate you, and they will come find you and serve you a citation that'll be filed with the FCC. It can be in the ballpark of $10,000. So just a fair warning there.
It'll be worth it just to get a license.
You need, if you do the training to get the license, you might as well just get it because you need the training to understand how
True.
things work.
I heard the test is super, super hard, is it? Is that
It's
true?
super easy.
Oh,
They have Saturday classes where you practice for 8 hours and then take the test, and you walk out of there with a license.
Where do you go to get a test?
There's quite a few places that do it on a regular basis. Food to Store down on Fairview and Eagle Road, they do it. I can't remember the name of the computer shop on Overland.
Oh,
JMR, JMS,
yeah.
JSM.
We're across by the golf course.
Yes.
Put a list on that.
Yeah, and so
JML.
I have several VEs that I can contact, and you have to have 3 VEs to hold a testing session. I can get 3 VEs together and hold a testing session anytime, anywhere,
Okay.
as long as there's enough people to justify it. And that $14 actually goes to the VEs to pay them for their time.
That's just to operate ahead, right?
What's that?
That's just to operate ahead.
That's to operate, that is to transmit on a ham radio frequency, yes. You can listen all day long. You can listen to anything. It's just like having a scanner. You can listen to the police. You can listen to FM country music radio. You can listen to ham radio.
What if you want to set up a repeater?
So
You're going to need a little more than just a basic license and a bow fan.
So he's going to answer a lot of your questions in his presentation, so maybe we hold the questions till the end, and then we can have a question session after that.
Yeah. So this is... I can't hear you.
Are there a couple of channels at the beginning that you are allowed to use, or is that not correct?
You cannot transmit on any ham radio frequency unless you are a licensed operator. There's 3 different classes of operator. There's the technician class, the general class, and the extra class. And each one of those has different frequencies on different bands that you're allowed to use. There are no frequencies you're allowed to use without a license. So this presentation I put together quite a while back. There's 2 basics to it. It's kind of going over the most important things that you cram for the test and then forget about the next day. and then it very specifically focuses on certain features of the Baofeng, which I have one here. The Baofeng ham radio. I have a little midget antenna, so when we do like trainings out in the desert, it doesn't transmit further than I want it to. It comes with a standard antenna like this. You can get a 19-inch antenna, which will broadcast further. You can plug it into a vehicle antenna. I've done nets on this, so this is a 4-watt radio. I have been net control where I ran the nets on a 0.5 watt up in the foothills in Star, and I reached everyone in the valley because I was plugged into the antenna on my truck. So you should spend at least as much on your antenna as you do on your radio. It kind of sucks, but that's the way it goes. Unless you're getting a Baofeng, because you should spend a lot more on an antenna than you do your radio. Baofengs are dirt cheap. This is a Baofeng, by the way. They're $26 delivered to your door on Amazon. Most cheap ham radios are $150 to $500, just to give you an idea. So, this is the Baofeng radio. So, I already held this up and showed it to you, but these are some of the features of it. You can find any listing of this on Amazon, and you'll find all these pictures, so I won't spend too much time on it. I can't hear
Spell
you.
it. Spell it.
Spelling?
How do you spell Baofeng?
Right there. B-A-O-F-E-N-G. There's another one called Pofong, which I think was the English translation of the Chinese translation of the English saying. And it's manufactured in China, so it's a Chinese knockoff of a Chinese knockoff of a Chinese radio. They both are identical, they look the same, they do the same thing. And they're roughly $20-something delivered to your door. So when I was talking about Simplex earlier, that's this station transmitting to this station and vice versa. That's what Simplex radio is, so I'll get into a little bit more detail about it. Because there's a couple different features that ham radio uses. So Simplex is like a walkie-talkie. If you just go to the store and buy the cheap toy walkie-talkies for $10, it has the old Morse code and the little tone button. That is Simplex. That means you are transmitting on frequency A. That person is listening on frequency A. And then when they transmit back, they're transmitting on frequency A, and you're listening on frequency A. You're both on the same frequency all the time. So duplex is a little bit different than that. Duplex uses 2 different frequencies. So when you transmit on frequency A, the person is listening on frequency B. And you have to program your radio for this, which is why you need to understand how a ham radio works. Not just ham radio in general, but your specific radio. Because when you key up to transmit, your radio is going to shift to a different frequency. And it's going to shift to the frequency that a repeater is listening for. And simultaneously, when it receives that frequency, it's going to broadcast your signal across the entire valley. Everyone is listening on the same frequency that you're listening on, but when you transmit, it's dropping to a different frequency. So I'll get into a little bit more detail with that here. So Simplex, so you take a frequency 146.520 megahertz. This guy is talking on it, this guy is talking on it, that's Simplex. On duplex, this is the split frequencies here. It's called a shift in frequency when you transmit. So he's transmitting on 147.720, and he's listening. So when he transmits out here, the repeater picks it up and spits it back out. This is a 600 megahertz negative offset, so it's 600 hertz, not megahertz. 147.120. So he hears it when he keys up, his radio jumps up to 147.720, and he's listening down here, 147.120. So this is all part of the ham band, which I'll explain in a minute. But one of the things you'll need to understand is if you're trying to talk on a repeater, so a lot of people probably don't know what a repeater is, so I'll explain it. So there's probably 15 repeaters here in the valley. There's 3 or 4 or 5 up on Bogus. There was one on Schaefer Butte, or I'm sorry, what's it, Squaw Butte? Squaw Butte. Last time I tried to get into it, it didn't, nothing happened, so I don't know what happened there. There's a couple out in Silver City, Cascade, Idaho, not Idaho Falls, what's it called?
Idaho City.
Idaho City, geez, thank you. What's that? It's called Pilot's Peak. Actually, there's one on Pilot's Peak. The one that used to be on War Eagle, which is right next to Cinnabar, which is above Silver City, that is connected to the Intermountain Intertie. So when you transmit on that repeater, that's connected to 19 other repeaters from northern Idaho to Arizona. It gets all the way into Flagstaff, Arizona.
Wow.
I've been driving to work from Star to Boise and talked to people in Flagstaff, Arizona in my truck.
Wow.
That's the repeater. So you can have a little dinky handheld radio as long as you can get a signal to a repeater up on a mountain. When that repeater gets that signal that is simultaneously spitting your signal out at 35 or 50 or 100 watts, depending on the repeater, but it's using an antenna that's 10 times or 100 times more efficient than your handheld antenna, and it's also 4,000 feet higher in the air than you are. So the footprint that a repeater, that's why they use repeaters, because it gets out over hundreds of miles. Like I said, I did a net on 0.5 watts and was able to talk to everyone in the valley that was checking into the net. So, in order to access a repeater, there's a secret handshake that you have to program your radio for. So even if you know what the repeater frequency is, you know the listen frequency and the transmit frequency, that's still not enough. There is a sub-audible tone called a CTCSS, which is a continuous tone-coded squelch system. Each repeater, most of them around here use 100 megahertz or 100 hertz, but there are some variances here and it's different in other areas. But if you don't have that tone programmed into your radio, the repeater will just ignore you. It won't open up a broadcast. So people can hear you on Simplex if they're on that frequency and within range of your radio, but the repeater will ignore you. And a lot of people that have the hunting radios you get at Walmart or Cabela's, they have those security channels. All that is a CTCSS tone. It means your radio is going to ignore everyone that's not sending that tone, but everyone can hear you. So it's not secured in any way, shape, or form. That's a complete misnomer. So this is the band plan here in Idaho. So on this one here, I'm supposed to zoom in here, but so you see there's two different frequencies here. There's your listen frequency and your talk frequency. So if you're listening on 145.250, which is a repeater out on Blacks Creek, when you key up your radio to transmit, your radio is going to shift down to 144.65 megahertz. That's your repeater input side. So any range on here, there's multiple frequencies in here. And because it's a 600 hertz offset, if you're inputting here, it's outputting here, or vice versa. Oh, sorry, I'm down here. Inputting here, outputting here. If you're inputting here, you're outputting here. Inputting here, you're outputting here. But you can select what that spread is, but it's typically 600 hertz because if the output signal that's happening while it's receiving an input signal is too close, they'll wash each other out in the antenna. So I'm kind of explaining this for you guys so you understand it's not something simple you can throw in a drawer and wait until the end of the world and pull it out and use it and expect to be effective. For those of you that are licensed ham radio operators, you should be able to look at, if you have a Baofeng, you should be able to look at this radio and identify exactly what mode it is. The problem is people that just cram for the test and never use it don't understand this, and I have to go to their house and spend 30 seconds going through the radio so they can be able to use it because they don't understand what's happening. So because this is tailored for the Baofeng, because that's the easiest entry into ham radio, that's what I geared this for. When you look at a ham radio and you look at this display, you can see that there's channel numbers right here. That means you're in channel mode, which on this is memory recall, MR, but when you hit it, it actually says out loud channel mode. And then frequency mode, which is VFO, the variable frequency oscillator. So when you change between those two modes, these are pre-programmed channels that you've loaded into your radio. And the settings that are contained within each one of those channels are not changeable. So when you program it, if you program it for repeaters, you're fine. But if you get out of this mode and can't figure out how to get back in, you're in big trouble. So you need to understand what mode your radio's in and how to put it in the mode you want and how to program it to do what you want it to do. So this, you can see there are not channel numbers here. This is in the VFO or frequency mode. This is where you can manually, using the keypad, you can manually type in any frequency you want. By the way, this is a dual band radio, so they're two completely different frequencies here. So 140-ish megahertz is the 2 meter band. In the 440 megahertz range is the 70 centimeter band. 70 centimeters is a much higher frequency, shorter wavelength. And they each have different benefits in different scenarios, different terrain, different weather. So, and there's many more bands than just the ones I'm talking about, but the most common, especially for handhelds, is the 70 centimeter and the 2 meter. So a couple things in your radio, if you go to menu 25 on the bow thing, that's how you turn your shift on and off. If you need to set it for a positive shift, you hit the arrow until there's a plus right here. If you want a negative shift, you hit the arrow until there's a minus right there. Then you have to go to menu item 26, and that's where you set your frequency spacing, which is a 600 hertz offset. This is in megahertz, so it's 0.6 megahertz. So that's the offset. The other one is the direction, either positive or negative. And then this is your transmit CT-CSS tone. So there's a receive CT-CSS tone, which is like the security feature on the hunting radios that you buy at Cabela's. All you're doing is telling the radio, ignore everyone else that doesn't have the secret handshake that I'm looking for. So that frequency that you set in here is that like secret handshake or secret knock. If it's on the receive side, your radio will never ever, your speaker won't come on to broadcast any frequency without that signal. When it's on transmit, you're transmitting that signal to other people. So anyone else with that setting, like a repeater, they'll completely ignore you unless you have the correct tone set in your radio. So that's as far as I got developing this. So
That's good, man.
Thank you.
Those are the most fundamental things. So I rushed through that super duper fast so I can answer some questions. If you guys have some questions, go ahead.
When I was a kid, my neighbor, he had a ham radio, and he used to talk to like Japan or Germany or different countries, and still talk locally. What did he go off of? A repeater off of those? This was.
What?
Did he go off a repeater on the
No.
on those?
No.
Because.
So there's different frequencies, and remember earlier I said there's a lot of different frequencies and a lot of different bands, and then frequency privileges depending on your license level within those bands. So from I think it's 70 centimeter, 225 and 70 centimeter, 2 meter. The main ones are, so you go 2 meter, 6 meter, 10 meter. 10 meter is about that frequency where you start getting radio waves bouncing off of stuff. Most of everything below that, it just goes straight through the ionosphere out into space and it's gone forever. When you get above 10 meters, you get 20 meters, 40, 60, 80, 140. Your friend was probably talking on 160. You can take a directional antenna and bounce signals off the moon.
He was military too, so that
Yeah.
might have been that.
But on the high frequencies, you'll never get to the moon. Or sorry, on the low frequencies. So I need to explain this. So there's a frequency number, which is the actual wavelength of the frequency. The longer the wavelength, the lower the frequency, right? But the smaller the number, because it's, well, I take that back, sorry. So if you take a 70 centimeter frequency, that means the sine wave for that frequency is 70 centimeters long. On 2 meters, a sine wave for that frequency is 2 meters long. Your friend was probably talking on 160 meters, which one sine wave is 160 meters long.
Wow.
It's a very, very long wavelength, and what happens, it'll go up, bounce off the ionosphere, and it'll bounce off the Earth and bounce off the ionosphere again. And that signal will bounce around the world. Or if you have a directional antenna, you can point it at the moon and bounce it off the moon. But you need higher frequencies to get through the atmosphere to bounce off of another object like that. But those radios, it's a complete, so this radio, I said it's a dual band radio, it does 70 centimeter and 2 meter. That's way up here. 160 meters is way down here. There's 10 different bands between those and 50 different radio options you can buy.
I know his antenna was like 30 feet long.
Yeah.
It was big.
But that was just the mast.
Yeah.
But the actual beams on the antenna, the spacing between each beam on the antenna is what you're tuning to the radio for that frequency you're using. And then if you're jumping frequencies, you actually have to use a frequency tuner that tweaks your signal to work with whatever antenna you have.
Okay.
Loud.
I have 2 questions. Number one, we're looking for a technician license.
Yes.
Second thing is on Prime, Amazon Prime, they have a book for that, free, I think, from the Kindle. So
Oh.
would that be the right thing to study before getting that?
Yes. Or you can go to hamtest.org or arrl.org, or just Google ham radio test information, and you'll find several websites. So even the book you're talking about, it lists the exact questions that are on the test. Last time I was involved, there were 355 questions, possible questions. There's 2 questions from each category, and I think it's 35 questions total, or 34 questions. So really quick math is that 17 categories, 2 questions each category. 34, yeah. I think there's 34 questions on the test. But, so there's only going to be, if you get to a category that you're just not good with, you might miss 2, and then you just move on. So what you're doing is they actually list all of those. You're just memorizing the question and the answer, which is why I built this, because a lot of people would pass the test, get their license, and the next day forget everything. So there's some things that are really important and stuff I didn't even get into on here, like tuning your antenna or what type of antenna. If you just take an antenna and plug it in your radio, if it's not the right antenna, it's not going to work. You might be able to talk to someone across the parking lot, but you're not going to talk to someone 20 miles away, because your antenna it's burning off most of that electromagnetic radiation, and it's not in a harmonic frequency that can actually allow it to broadcast out. All right, hang on a second. There's a question over here. Oh, all right, go ahead.
I made a J-pole, I think is what, a
J-pole.
brass one. Now, do I have to have that frequency tuned to her, her radio?
Did you just take a bunch of copper pipe and solder it together?
I did it by the specs, what it said.
Okay, so the specs are giving you exact dimensions.
Yes.
For exact lengths of the components of that antenna.
Yes.
Including on your jade return. That
Yes.
spacing there is important too.
Yes.
Because if it's a harmonic of the wavelength, it'll throw off the transmission from the main beam.
Okay. I didn't
So if
measure
you
with
made it
micro-
to spec, it's whatever spec that was for, which usually a J-pole is for 2 meter. That's the most common, because that's what people use for just local simplex
I
transmission.
didn't use a micrometer or anything to get the measurements. I
Yeah, measuring tape will
tape-
work.
tape-
Micrometer's better,
Yeah, I
but
got it, but I didn't use it.
you can't get a 19-inch micrometer.
Oh, yeah, I can. I'm a machinist.
Question for Jason. Can you explain the difference when you want your signal to go far, when you want to broadcast a great distance, and what scenarios you might want your signal to be very local and small? For your
Well,
broadcast?
when I'm out in the desert with 40 other people doing a militia training exercise and we're talking on the radios, we don't want that all broadcasting into Boise in the mountain. So I have this little stubby antenna because the signal's not going to go very far. If I do want to get far, the radio in my truck will link with this. It's called crossbanding. I'll have this in 70 centimeter, my truck's in 2 meters. So I'll talk to my truck on 70 centimeter and it'll act like a repeater and broadcast out. My truck's a 50-watt radio, this is a 4-watt radio. Just to give you an idea, the CB is limited by law to 5 watts. But CB is 11 meters. It's a fairly long wavelength. And you see the big long antennas on the trucks because they got to get to it. The length of the antenna has to be a harmonic length of the frequency. But I was driving through Utah and talking to a guy in Florida on 5 watts on CB. On 5 watts. On ham radio, your maximum legal transmission limit is 2,500 watts. You can get way out there and do a lot of stuff with a ham radio, which is why you have to have a license for it. Ben.
Oh, good. Question regarding the CTC.
You gotta talk loud, you're far away.
Question about the CTCSS, the
Yeah.
last number that you entered. Isn't that the offset number?
No. The offset is the offset number.
I know, but if you subtract that from the actual frequency, that doesn't come up with that, right?
No, the offset number is what you're subtracting from your listening frequency or adding to your listening frequency. The CTCSS is a subaudible tone that you cannot hear, but it's basically a code to say, hey, this transmission is on purpose. And so whatever the listening device is, if it's a repeater or whatever, it'll say, okay, we need to listen to this. It'll open up and rebroadcast it. So if someone's just running through frequencies and transmits on a repeater frequency, but they don't have that tone turned on, the repeater will just ignore it. All it is just like a secret knob for it to know that it should open up and rebroadcast the transmission.
Either 100 megahertz or 103, or I think those are the two that are in this area. I thought that was
There's a couple others, but most of them are 100, and there's a couple private repeaters that have chosen their own. The standard around here, and actually the biggest standards is 100 hertz that I've seen. But there's 20 or 30 different options of those subaudible tones.
Is that what number goes in that CTCSS?
CTCSS is the subaudible tone frequency.
I got it now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The shift or the offset is the offset split frequency between your transmit and your listen, right? Whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah, got it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a stupid question.
I love stupid questions.
So, can I just, me by myself, can I just buy one of those from Amazon and the antenna?
Comes with an antenna,
Do I have to hook stuff up at my house?
a battery charger.
Okay, so what he was talking about with all this, and you guys.
No, this is a handheld radio. It's not a base
So I
station.
don't need anything.
He was talking about a giant base station that was at least 1,000 watts, if not more, with a 30-foot antenna mast with antenna beams as wide as this room.
Okay, because I saw all the information when a thing was sent out, and I'm going,
No, she's asking about the J-pole. Does she need a J-pole?
Oh, the J-pole?
Yes.
yeah, do I need
That's-
other stuff?
That's
Do I
6
need-
feet. The antenna that comes with it will transmit, but it will not transmit very far. It won't go through buildings.
But I
It
can
won't
do
go
one.
through trees. Any kind of obstacle is going to slow down your frequency. It's going to diminish your frequency until it's gone. The bigger your frequency, the bigger your antenna, the higher your antenna. When you're higher, you're clearing obstacles. When you have more power, it's going through more obstacles.
But I can just buy that bigger one. I don't have to have.
You're gonna be listening. So that's the main component. You listen first, right? Nobody
Right.
gets to speak unless you get your license.
Right.
So listening is really critical.
Whoever's transmitting, if you're just listening, whoever's transmitting needs to have a good station or be in a good location. Like I said, from my truck, I've been in the Star foothills and broadcast over the whole valley on 1/2 watt. This does, what's that, 8 times that? And I've done, actually this one does 8 watts, so it does 16 times that. This is actually an 8 watt radio. Most Baofangs are only 4 watt. They're 1 watt and 4 watt are the two settings, high and low. Does that make sense? Yes.
If we wanted to buy local where would we go to buy an antenna or anything?
Can't remember what it's called. I think it's called JRM. Then there is Ham Radio Outlet, HRO, which is in Portland, or I think it's Portland, Oregon. They're actually online as well if you don't want to buy it from Amazon. But locally, there's a couple like private I shouldn't say private, they're open to the public, but they're not very well-known ham shops that carry ham equipment. But the main one is JRM or RJM. Thank you. That's it. It's on Overland by the golf course, the yellow pedestrian bridge, in that little strip mall there.
By the theater.
Any other question?
I got one more quick, you got one more second, just real quick.
I have 1 second.
Okay, so there was a question as to what frequencies you could broadcast on without a license.
0. None.
I know there had been some conversation before. I heard that 1 through 19, MERS and FRS, is that not the case anymore? Because I know sometimes people...
Those are not ham radio frequencies.
Okay, so...
They are close. So
that radio
to explain to you the benefit of this radio, which is why I bought it, I actually own several of them. So the 2-meter frequency spectrum is this big. The ham radio spectrum is this big. So this radio will actually listen and transmit on all police frequencies, all fire frequencies, all EMS frequencies, all national forest frequencies, all weather frequencies, all business radio frequencies, all GMRS frequencies, all FRS frequencies, all MERS frequencies, and all 2-meter ham radio frequencies. And that's just the 2-meter band. This is a dual band radio. It does 70 centimeters also. Yeah.
But you can't transmit on those.
FRS and GMRS are the hunt radios you buy at Walmart or Cabela's. By FCC, the type acceptance is that it cannot have a detachable antenna, so technically you're breaking the law because this antenna comes off.
And the wattage.
It's still a legal frequency that you can transmit on without a license.
Right, okay.
Yeah, there is a limitation on wattage for 7 of those frequencies on FRS. But nobody has
You
that
want
license.
GMRS too that are limited.
Go ahead.
Can we paint the J-pole, or that has to stay in color?
I would imagine you can paint it.
I think I read you can.
I would also imagine the thicker you paint it, the more it affects the frequency, but a thin coat of paint probably doesn't affect it.
But also when you secure it to your roof, you don't want to have a metal strap holding it. You have to have some kind of...
Anything metal that's near it either needs to be 1 full wavelength away, or it needs to be offset from a harmonic frequency of that wavelength.
Right.
Otherwise you get harmonic distortion.
And make sure it's grounded.
Yeah, probably. Your radio?
No, your antenna.
You good?
It's not a lightning rod.
Is it grounded?
No, it's not a lightning rod.
So obviously, there is a lot that we have to learn, right? I mean, a lot of his communication to me sounded like he was talking from China. In fact, that radio that he has is made from Wuhan. So you got to be careful with that. No, thank you, Jason. And it's like with everything, right? We're not going to learn it all here. This is an introduction. Basically, Jason just showed us that we really don't know much, or most of us don't know much. And if this is going to become a communication tool in which we use, we need to get ourselves educated, and that means at your home, in front of a computer, or in a book, or going to a class, and it's not going to really happen here. But what we have done is you can log on, you get your area frequencies, you have your net session times, and we can start uniting and using it, and we'll get better and better and better at it. All right.